I'm Travis Bader, and this is the Silvercore Podcast. Join me as I discuss matters related to hunting, fishing, and outdoor pursuits with the people and businesses that comprise the community. If you're new to Silvercore, be sure to check out our website, www.silvercore.ca, where you can learn more about courses, services, and products that we offer, as well as how you can join the Silvercore Club, which includes $10 million in North America-wide liability insurance to ensure you are properly covered during your outdoor adventures. Here we are, episode 3 of the Urban Awareness series, where our discussions will revolve around what to expect after the incident. But first, Paul, now you recalled something that you wanted to clear up from episode 2.
In the last podcast, I couldn't remember the name of Brian Willis, and he is the president of the Winning Mind Training and Company and that WIN principle. What's important now is the most important question in life. And his training tells you how to develop that concept, and not to horn in any more on him and issues with copyright, but I just want to promote Brian Willis at this point and in his what is important now principles for both everyday living for normal people and police training. Excellent. Met him about 30-something years ago in Ottawa. We were at the Canadian Police College together, and I was immediately struck with the guy. Enjoyed the time I spent with him, stayed in touch for a little bit, lost track, and sure enough, he turns up delivering his WIN program at the, I guess it was the City of Vancouver Tactical Training Center. And lo and behold, there's Brian, and I look at him, and one of the things that became important to him was lose weight, and boy, did he ever. He was hardly recognizable, but that's it.
Awesome.
Okay,
WIN. I like it. What's important now?
Well, after you've won, what happens?
So we're in the after now. We had the before, the during, and after. Now, after, Paul, have you ever found yourself in a situation where you have had an argument, a disagreement, something's happened, and you spend a lot of time afterwards thinking about, oh, I should have done this, or I should have said that? I think everyone's had that, and there's a very easy way to help minimize the effects of that, and that's by properly preparing before and understanding what this whole after section looks like.
Yeah, the 20/20 hindsight, right?
Tell me about it. Everyone's got that in crystal clear vision.
And you know, that happens with everything. You know, you buy a car, you've got 20/20 hindsight, buyer's remorse, all those things, you know, that, and there's stress in buying a car. I don't care who you are. There's, you know, that first meeting with another person who you have an affection for, and you go, oh, as you're driving away from the disaster of that meeting and reliving the moment. But we're talking about some serious stuff here, and some of the things that can affect you afterwards. And I know we alluded to Joseph Wambaugh on the onion field and, you know, what happened to those officers after the moment. But you really got to, in the planning stage for the 3 phases of a critical incident, we actually need to plan for post-critical incident. Now, the term PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, is used a lot, and it's a very, very real thing.
It's evolving.
It does, and our treatment of it and our acceptance of it and our recognition of who can be involved in it, and it's not just a first responders thing as well. It was interesting today listening to a local radio station, top of the news, you know, they're going through some of the highlights, and in light of the recent number of these open-air shootings, targeted hits, they're asking the people, how do they feel? What do they think? And they're not only reaching out to people who haven't experienced it, the public in general, but I think they're starting to talk to the people that are there. And that can be, you know, a lot of stuff going on. Survivor's guilt is part of post-traumatic stress. And that is, nothing happened to me. And I'm here, and I feel bad because was there more I could have done? Did I, you know what? That's one you should never feel bad about. Survivor's guilt is, a real thing. It can be treated, of course, as any kind of disorder as a result of something like this. Getting treated for it is probably one of the plans you should have. If you've been through something like this and you think that you should just ride it out afterwards and not talk to a pro,
Forget about it.
pardon my expression, but you're crazy.
Mm-hmm.
Like that, if you've been somewhere and something of this high order occurs in front of you and you're just going to shake it off and tell your friends, not good.
So after an incident, whether that was a physical altercation, whether there's a weapon involved, whether maybe it was just a verbal altercation that somebody was in.
How about a horrible car accident in front of you?
Right. If I'm personally involved in that incident, one of the first things that I will tend to do is give a quick rapid body survey. Make sure I don't have things sticking out of me that shouldn't be sticking out of me. Maybe when the adrenaline kicked in, I didn't feel things as I normally would, and make sure that there isn't any immediate medical attention that I need in order to be able to continue surviving after the first incident. So that's one of the things. I will then look to those around me and see, are they in the same situation?
Everybody else okay?
Right. And then there's going to be the physiological effects of the adrenaline wearing off and the shakes and the
Extreme fatigue.
huge. And knowing that that's normal, knowing that this is a very natural response that the body has to critical incident stress. And when all of this stuff kind of abates, if the police are involved, be prepared to be questioned as if you were possibly the bad guy, the bad person.
Yeah, so let's just clarify and we'll talk, post incident. This is it. This is where you did get involved in something. You got physical with somebody or they got physical with you and there was a conflict, there was a physical contact and everything went that way. Okay? So we'll keep our focus on that maybe so in the immediate after. Excellent. Check yourself out. Have somebody else look through your hair, look through all these other things, make sure that there's nothing leaking. And because what happened when you had that huge adrenaline dump, that also can send all kinds of, natural painkillers throughout your body to keep you in the fight. And now that may start to show up. Check the people around you. Absolutely. One step before all that, are you 100% safe at that moment before you start doing that? Like we need that one in there. Now we are safe. We've checked ourselves out. We've gone over. The hands start to shake, potentially. And again, it's a lot based on how much you've trained beforehand, whether that's going to happen. And I got to be, forthright with this. The person that got through it on a minimal amount of training without a whole lot of rehearsal is likely to feel those immediate effects a little bit more than the trained person. And, your cognitive effects starting to come back at this point as well, thinking of the bigger picture. I have seen people that are just it's over, it's done, everything's safe, but they're still not there. They're, running around in circles. They're having problems processing what they just went through. And the more trained person is now realizing, okay, what are the next steps involved? So, I don't know, without getting into too many specifics, but, the subject is down and out and there's no fight left in it. The 1+1 rule, is there anybody else who's checking to see that, who's watching, who's administering first aid? All these sorts of things are important.
Make sure the police are called if needed, or ambulance, emergency services.
Preservation of any evidence that may be potentially there. All these things, are in that moment. But let's just, again, going back. So the handshaking, one of the things that people want to do is now make it look like they're normal, and the emotion of maybe some, like, maybe it's appropriate if I'm upset with myself and started saying things like, oh, I should have done something else. Maybe this, wouldn't have turned out so bad.
They start acting it up.
And a true feeling that comes from a lot of this stuff, if you did win and you did it successfully, is a sense of overwhelming pride and satisfaction that, gee whiz, I did that.
Mm-hmm.
And you know what? If you've laid waste to somebody physically, whatever the case may be, people will start thinking, well, you bloodthirsty son of a gun, or daughter of a gun, maybe. Mm-hmm. And how dare you feel good about what you did? Well, it's not wrong.
No, it's natural.
And now we're going to save this for just a little bit later in the aftermath, and who's appropriate to tell this to.
Mm-hmm.
But don't hide that from yourself. Mm-hmm. It's not a wrong thing to feel in that immediate aftermath. It's not, pride in yourself, relief. You want to congratulate yourself. You go, oh my God, that was me that ended that. Mm-hmm. There's nothing wrong with that. Mm-hmm. Now, turning around to the TV camera that's showing up, then they shove a microphone in your face and wanting to, fist pump and everything else. In that circumstance, we'll save it.
Right. High fives for everyone.
Yeah. Let's not do that at that moment. Whereas you've seen time and time again in a critical incident, law enforcement, the military, they've gone and just overcome a situation of extreme stress, and the next thing you know, they high-five each other, and that gets captured on camera.
Right.
Well, you know what? There's no context there because nobody who's watching that on TV or in the taping afterwards has the emotions that those people had. Mm-hmm. And were they wrong emotions? No. Were they expressed incorrectly, and was it captured on tape? Absolutely. Mm-hmm. And then these things are hard for the people, the non-sheepdogs, to appreciate. Mm-hmm. And you know what? The wolves are not just the people that are attacking you. The wolves are out there in society because they want to suppress the sheepdog. Sheepdog is always a threat to a wolf. Now, the wolves may not be physically attacking, but the wolves have agendas, right? Mm-hmm. I'm getting a little bit political here, but that's the way I really feel. And
I don't disagree with
you.
If
you can belittle the sheepdog for doing what the sheepdog does, the sheep, who has no grounding in the sheepdog's purpose, sees it. So anyways, getting back to in the immediate, don't be embarrassed by that feeling of a sense of pride.
That's a good point.
Okay? Don't be upset about that. So we're in the immediate here. Your physical self is taken care of. You're feeling some different emotions, okay? Don't be afraid of that feeling that said, I did the right thing, and don't feel there's a huge obligation at that moment to start explaining what you just did. Law enforcement arrives, first aid arrives, whatever. It's that big of a thing. They need to talk to you.
Interesting thing about law enforcement arriving, just a bit of a side note. Whoever calls law enforcement in first tends to wear a white hat.
So if you're able to get on your cell phone and get it out there that you are the reportee, mm-hmm. You are that entity that has called the police, yeah, that's a good plan. And that is. And then you also set a bit of a stage by, relating a little bit. But what you got to be careful of is if you did cause physical harm to another individual, even though it was in complete defense of your own self, you don't want to be too willing to try and explain everything in the moment. Mm-hmm. Because what you're not realizing is in that 24 hours following an extremely stressful event, you're still suffering those effects, those good effects that you had of, it's like we call it a wrinkle in the space-time continuum. But really, visual narrowing, auditory exclusion, depth perception, all of these things are altered in the moment, okay? Mm-hmm. people, say, "Oh man, I got the guy," and the time it took for him to do. You really don't have the grounding to start talking a lot about that.
You're kind of the worst possible witness to your own event.
Right.
Because you've got a very, very narrow perspective of what happened, whereas somebody else looking at this might have a much better perspective.
And one of the things we see in today's world is the reliability of eyewitness accounts of what really happened. A really good investigator will rely much more on the whatever they have for physical evidence, So where the blood splatter is, where the casing lands, all those things are way more, absolute than what a person says. And I would just honestly, from having been there myself, say, look, I want to be completely cooperative with everybody right now. But my statement may be affected by the feelings that I have. And that's the thing. Be prepared to say that. I'm not withholding anything, but without having the chance to talk to someone who's not involved and the time for me to gather my thoughts, I will give you a full statement tomorrow or later. And it's very tough and haven't been one for as long as I was, for a cop to accept that.
Right.
They're not going to want to. They want the whole story. They want it now. They want to get the report written and get the investigation underway and all these other things.
Well, if you've got nothing to hide, why wouldn't you talk?
That's right. And yes, exactly. And that's, that is it. And you don't have anything to hide.
You don't.
But in the interest, and you got to, explain and articulate this properly, in the interest of accuracy, I'm not prepared. Now, if the situation is still ongoing, somebody has fled the scene that's still important to the investigation, by all means, you got to give what sketchy details as possible. But you need to preface everything that you're saying. It's like, I'm telling you this now. This is the best I understand. But my absolute statement that I'm going to live and die for or by is not coming right now. This isn't it. I'm too close to the incident for you to, listen to all this stuff. And it is. It's very, very tough to accept on the part of an investigator. But you know what? This is you. As I was sitting in the major crime office, I had been given my rights that I didn't have to say anything, just like on TV. And I'm there, and I said, yeah, that's fine. I've called my lawyer. There is a post-incident team that will come and talk to you. They're on their way to come and talk to me, but the sergeant comes in and says to me, he says, I know you've said you don't want to say anything until you speak to your lawyer, but the forensic guys at the scene, they can't find the casing from your pistol. Is there any chance you picked it up? We just need that. And, and I said, no, it's in the mop bucket in the hallway next to where I was standing. Because now going back to the moment and all the things that were going on, when I fired that shot, in my peripheral vision, I saw the case arc up out of the ejection port of the pistol, and somewhere deep in the back of my head, I still heard the plunk, and actually a sizzle plunk of that case going into a mop bucket that was in the hallway of where the shooting had occurred. And I could see the look on the sergeant's face like, oh, yeah. And he's on the cell phone.
Okay, Rain Man.
He's on the cell phone to the forensic guy that's there, who's a guy I know, actually, a hunting partner. And he goes, what? You can hear him, saying this. So anyways, got it. And they just said, got it. And that's where it was. But weird. I took that in that moment. And, but the point being is I wasn't saying anything. I talked to my lawyer. I gave the statement to my lawyer that I recalled. He was fine with that. We got back together later the next morning to review the statement, which he had recorded and then prepared for my signature, which we were going to offer up. And everything was fine. There was no, there was no big if, ands or anything, but we wanted to get distances and everything correct. And that next day, I went about some business, which is another interesting side to things, gave my statement, and then I get in the police world, what happens now is they say, always sounds suspicious. The officer has been put on paid leave, but they just basically say, hey,
Take some time.
Take some time. And they want you to take some time. In that time thing, the only thing I wanted to do was go back to the scene. I really wanted to see it again. There was no opportunity to do that. I took my couple weeks, whatever it was at the time, went about my regular life. I'll tell you, in that period of time, one of the things that bothered me more than anything, and things will irritate you, was everybody wanting to hear the story over and over and over again.
Right.
And that's totally normal.
It's normal for people to want, because they want to learn.
They want to hear.
Right.
And there's nothing wrong with talking about it, but there's certain people that you probably want to avoid talking to it about it. I sought out a couple other people that have been there, and those were the ones I want to talk about. And that's nothing wrong with that. So in that post situation, if you can find somebody to relate to, and in many cases, the post critical incident team, that those are people that have been there, and they have empathy.
Right. And I think you bring up a good point about talking about it afterwards. It's an important thing to do, but there's a right way and a wrong way to talk about it, because as research looks at how our brains work, our prefrontal cortex has got our decision-making and our short-term memory, and our hippocampus will take our long-term memory, our amygdala will hold our emotions. And as we start processing certain types of events in our prefrontal cortex, it'll start downloading hard copies into your hippocampus and your amygdala. And even though you aren't actually in a certain situation at that certain time, you will recount those emotions as if you were. And if you continually download the information into those storage banks,
it's like a flushing almost
in the improper way. It's like, and I liken it to going down a dirt road and you wore some tracks in there. The more you drive the same road, the deeper those tracks get and the harder it is to get out, which is a big part about where PTSD, critical incident stress, and PTSD theory and therapy is being worked on. How do we get the brain out of that rut and those tracks in order to be able to view this thing from a perspective as it ought to be? So talking important. Talking to the police at the time of the event, you're the worst possible witness.
Nope. Yeah, you're not a good witness at that time. Yeah. Talking it out with somebody, the idea is also about culpability. If there's any, somebody wants to make some suggestion that you did something wrong, you remember anybody you talk to can also be called later as a witness to you. So, the best person to talk to about this is somebody who cannot testify against you, which is your psychologist or a psychiatrist or someone like that. And getting in and before that person to do your initial download. Oh, the lawyer also is very good. Lawyers,
sure,
and they can listen. They may have no grounding in it, but they can certainly listen to you. And the lawyer is not going to look at you and say, "Geez, you should leave that part out of your statement," because they don't do that.
No,
that's not what they do. I mean, if you've really done some significant harm to somebody, but you got out of it that way, a lawyer is definitely there. If the whole situation we're talking about is maybe you've defended yourself against a sexual attack or a robbery, okay? One of the things you say to the police is, I don't want to give my statement now, but I sure want to talk to somebody, and I want to talk to the right people. In today's world, most of the time, that the police might be the very best resource you have for directing you to do that. Despite everything that people want to say, today's police officer is trained to understand the effects of post-traumatic stress. And they are told that victims are going to feel that. And almost every agency has some form of victim services that will be available to you, and don't be that person who says, well, I don't want to talk to anybody about this. I'm going to be okay. I'm going to run home, tell my wife, and tell my friends, and I'm going to have a couple of beers because it was exciting too. That's another tendency that you have. Like, wow, I'm alive and I'm okay, and
you're
it
happy.
went well, there's probably a much more male thing to do. But to go out and get together with your buds and tell them about it. Some people can be affected at a deeply, deeply emotional level by this.
Mm-hmm.
You got to deal with that. And the sooner it happens and done with a professional who can carry you forward, that's a good thing.
And it's going to affect everyone differently. I mean, people are going to have different cognitive resiliencies.
Yeah.
They're going to be in different situations. I remember talking about there was a study once about these vets from World War I fighting in World War II in some horrific instances where they figured that the younger, stronger soldiers would be out surviving the older ones. And they found the inverse was true because the older ones had developed these cognitive resiliencies, and they look at it and they say, my second divorce is worse than this, right? And whereas the young guys in there, this is the worst thing that's ever happened to them.
And, again, going back to the policing, and I don't mean to bore people by talking about it, but it's what I know, what I've been around. In a lot of cases, some of the crazier stuff that I've been involved in while I was on duty, I would have rather been surrounded by, a bunch of gray-haired fat guys, that could keep their wits about them than the strongest, fittest,
right,
that are there. And I hate to say that, and no disrespect to people who maintain a high level of physical fitness and everything else, but gray hair and some experience can sometimes be a little bit better, even though you don't think they have the physical abilities. But a couple other things, like, immediately after, if the thing that happened is big enough, and almost everything is big enough today, it's going to hit the media. And then you're going to have a whole bunch of people armchair quarterback what you did.
Right.
Doing podcasts, funny enough, people armchair quarterback what you say.
Yeah, they do.
And it's as a person who tries to pride himself in the ability to communicate things, sometimes you're not communicating, your point correctly, or the other person wants to take something tangentially away.
Sure.
And then your dander gets up when you go, does this person just not get it? Did I not communicate everything correctly? And we're never going to make everybody happy. But if you've been in it, and all of a sudden, and this happened, listening on the radio the next day to a chief of police, he wasn't really a chief of police because that organization never had them, is being interviewed on the local radio station. And he's telling everybody about, all the things that the officer involved in the shooting yesterday would be feeling and everything else. And I'm going, you weren't there.
Right.
You weren't there. And I had the opportunity to track that guy down after I had done my, period of time off. He happened to be making a presentation on that very subject. And I made a point of going, and I went up to him afterwards, and I says, you've been talking a lot about this stuff. You talked about me. You never met me. You never interviewed me. You weren't at the scene. And you made a whole bunch of things into factual points that weren't factual.
And I think that is human nature.
Oh, you want to fill in the blanks, right?
Totally. But it's so difficult for the person who is in it, for the survivor of the event.
Who knows exactly what went on.
Right. And it comes down to, and when we talk about being a witness to our own event, and maybe we're not the best, and maybe a third-party witness watching would be better, but maybe not the most reliable as well. Even video cameras are being shown to be an unreliable witness in certain circumstances. I remember I was at a conference and there's some guys that are doing some high-level forensics work with video and looking about the frame rate and lost frames and the speed that it goes at. And it can actually tell a different story than what really happened. So I guess what I'm trying to get at with all of this is everybody's different. Everyone's going to have different resiliencies. Everyone's going to find themselves in a situation, maybe they leave and it means nothing to them, or maybe it's the worst thing in the world to them. whatever it is, this critical incident stress that they're feeling is a natural physiological response to an unnatural event. And that's it. And they should just simply accept that for what it is, how I'm feeling right now, whether it's the guilt, whether it's the anger, whether it's a depression or whatever it might be. Hey, this is actually pretty natural, in the same way as if I got a hammer to my kneecap and that hurts is a natural response. And everyone's going to be a little different in how that reacts.
Correct.
And I got a funny story on that one.
But if you get that hammer to the kneecap, do you just go home and put some ice on it, or do you go get x-rays and get a doctor to look at it and tell you to put it back together?
Right.
And this is the thing. Your emotions may not be good enough just to put a little bit of ice on it. And the underlying thing of a very high level stress incident to you is it's got to be dealt with. It's got it, and
the sooner the better.
Correct. And you're going to go forward and you're going to listen to that person, the right person as well. Pick and choose. Okay, it's like do some reviews on who the person is. You don't want to go to a particular field of study psychologist that doesn't deal with post-critical incident stress. I mean, the Randy Makoffs, the Georgian Emits, those type of people,
right.
They know.
Right.
They are the ones.
And both of them happen to work with police.
Yes. Please, and that's where we got to be upfront about this. The people in the military, people in the police, all the first responders are much more likely to have experienced this stuff, and that's the thing. So reach out to these people.
The one point on that, though, if I can quickly,
one of many,
the one of many, if I can quickly interject, is quite often I find that a person who finds themselves in a situation like this will look and say, well, I'm not a police officer. I don't see the atrocities that they see. I'm not a soldier. I haven't seen the atrocities that they've seen. Regardless of your background, whatever the effects you're feeling could be the exact same as what somebody who's seen an atrocity to something, the effects that are having on your mind and your body. And there's one story that I read talking about PTSD. I don't know if we talked about this one before, Paul, the chocolate bar eater. Have you heard this one?
No.
Okay, so this guy he's in the States. He goes into a corner store and he gets himself a chocolate bar. Gets halfway through this chocolate bar before he realizes it's full of maggots. Okay, goes to the shopkeep, says, chocolate bar's got maggots in it. I'm pretty revolted. Shopkeep says, sorry, here's a refund. Get yourself another chocolate bar, whatever. Have a good day. The guy's good. He goes home. But then he starts having nightmares and dreams about maggots being in his food. And then he says he doesn't want to go to church anymore because he figures everyone's going to be talking about him and laughing at him. He's humiliated as the maggot eater, right? And then he's having these recurring thoughts. He's having avoidance of things that he usually likes. He's having depression, all off of eating something that some people in the world would readily eat anyways, right? Just worms, larvae, maggots, whatever it might be. You or I might look at this and say, that's nothing. But how that affected this person exhibited all the signs of PTSD. So if somebody listening to this finds themselves in a situation and they say, well, I'm embarrassed to go see a doctor to talk about somebody because I'm having these thoughts or it's affecting me in these ways. I'm feeling grief, fear, guilt, intense anger, irritability, chronic anxiety, apprehension, or depression. And yes, I'm reading this off of a list right now. But these are all sort of the emotional things that can be happening. It doesn't matter. No one's going to think less of you. You got to get that addressed.
Absolutely. Now, and as you're saying that, there's real symptoms. And if you're not trained to recognize these real symptoms, it's gonna go. One of the things that was really noted with people who weren't getting treatment after, and in the police world and in today's police world, man, as soon as something sketchy has occurred while you're working, supervisors are there. The managers are on top of the supervisors to make sure that everybody gets it addressed. Guys used to, back in the old days, and I mean the old days were when I first started in the late 70s, something happened, it was straight to the the liquid.
Right.
Self-medicate and let's sit around those little tables and we'll talk this out. Lots of laughs and everything else.
Right.
And you know what? It was very reassuring at the time. Everybody had a good go with it and so on. And what happened with that kind of treatment for that kind of an incident, it really had no long-lasting effect. In the moment, it felt good to have a couple of drinks, numb yourself a little bit, and go home, sleep it off, or do whatever you were going to do. But the cumulative effect, if you don't get things treated, and this is where when you hear about people like, they saw something horrible happen, and didn't really feel that bad about it, and then something else, and the old happen in threes. I really believe in that. Things, so when people say, well, I've seen something like this, it's never going to happen again. Oh, boom, it happens, and then the third time after it's over, they completely break down. And maybe the third time wasn't that big, but there was something in their psyche that triggered all this other stuff that they were holding back. And I'm no psychologist or anything else, but we see it again and again in untreated people, right? That's the important part. Being, unarmed for the next one. And the only way you're going to get armed and prepared for the next one is to get that professional help.
Right.
So we got to tell it. And nobody should be ashamed. And a traumatic event could be seeing a car accident. A traumatic event could be seeing somebody fall off a mountainside while you're rock climbing, and watch somebody fall and get hurt. Right? Traumatic event to some people could be seeing literally a body being taken out of a drowning victim or something like that.
Sure.
That, you don't need to see that. And that's one of the things, again, societally we'll see, people going, oh my God, look at that. There's a yellow blanket over that person. Let's see if we can get a little closer. No, you don't need to see that. Leave it. Don't subject yourself to it any more than you've put something in there. You don't need to wonder about it or anything else because it will actually help you continue on. You don't need to get close. You don't need to see blood or anything like that. It's shocking how people will come up and want to take pictures of blood and everything else. You don't need that because you are actually, and especially if you drag a kid up to see it, anything else, you don't know what that does to kids. So
that's a good point. You're not only responsible in the after effect for yourself, the rapid body survey, and your emotional well-being and physical well-being, you're responsible for your loved ones and those that you care for, and make sure that maybe you're not the right person for them to be talking with.
Right.
And maybe it's just ingraining the same garbage.
Like you don't know how your kid took it, what they saw and everything else like that. And that has happened, a bit in my own life and everything else. And you don't realize how, emotionally sensitive your kid might be, or how much damage you can do to your kid by saying, oh, just toughen up and, get on with it, right?
They don't even have to be at the incident, but they're responding to you after the incident and how you're dealing with it. That's a good point.
A couple other things, too. And in the old days, when they first started, in the very experimental days of looking towards post-traumatic stress and the syndrome or the disease or disorder that would follow that, they would tell you, get ready for this. And I did kind of mention this, I think.
You did, yes.
But truthfully, don't listen to that.
Right.
Because these self-fulfilling
prophecies,
suggestions or prophecies, because you're not fragile, but you're open to suggestion in these things. And you think, oh my God, I've just seen this horrible thing. What's happening next?
And here's how I should respond next.
And you will, and you don't want to do that.
Right.
So, watch that. Again, if you shed a tear and you can't sleep about something, you're affected by it. And if you shed a tear when you just think about something after it's happened, a day or two, and you can't sleep a couple of days afterwards,
you're affected.
Oh, yeah. Those are the things that, you've got to reach out. And it's free in our system, and it's there. But going back to it, don't think because you're not an official that you can't be affected by this stuff and to go on. So I think we're good at talking in the immediate, the self-assessment. We're talking in the kind of short term of getting the treatment. So the long term, if it was something that was being initiated by a criminal act, you need to expect that there's likely to be the requirement for you to recall everything and maybe to give evidence in court, have your statement that was provided at the time be reviewed, and that stuff. And this becomes another time where you need to arm yourself for a secondary attack. Because remember, there are lots and lots of wolves out there, and another form of wolf appears to be the person who would defend them in court. And you know what?
Right.
A defense lawyer is just doing their job. They have nothing personal against you or anything else, but suddenly you're put up there. You're promising to tell everything the truth, and this person's job is to make you second guess every single thing that you know that happened. So in preparation for that court case, talk to the prosecutor, who will be able to give you, the legalities of what you need to understand about all this. May, if the prosecutor is particularly good, give you some, again, arrows in your quiver to deal with the questions that might be coming up by maybe running a bit of a mock trial, without the actual thing happening, all these sorts of things. But you're ready for it because peeling the scab off, you're just about healed. There's a scab on there, and that court case could very well pull the scab off and get you thinking about everything else. So it's not wrong if that happens and you have an emotional reaction to recounting what's there. And it can be 2 years in our system, 2-3 years from the time of the incident.
That's just for criminal. It
Right.
could be civil.
Oh, yeah. Now,
Eight years later.
Well, let's talk about the civil. That's the car accident.
Right.
That's the other thing. You saw somebody slide down a collapsed escalator in the mall. Those things will come. So again, being prepared to, have that return of those emotions, and then in turn dealing with that. So. We make it so important that you survive the incident, whatever it is. But surviving the aftermath can be,
It's massive.
And that's probably in days of yore where we slipped up, right? And it was interesting, we saw probably the first real, in your face is the post-Vietnam War time. When the First World War was fought, our brave young men and a lot of horses were shipped off to places unknown, that we couldn't communicate that well with. And when we came back, we lauded them as heroes, and we looked at those guys that were nervous and shaking and couldn't deal with things as being cowards.
Right.
But by far and away, those were the guys that, suffered the greatest effects. In a lot of other cases, these guys that went off and they came back, they were welcomed with open arms. They were loved for what they did. And affection and emotion can, I'm not a psychologist, everyone. There is no doctor before the Ballard here. But what I'm saying is it was different times. The Second World War, those guys came back, and we were happy because they put fascism in its place, and they saved people, and they did all sorts of things, and we loved them. And there were still guys going to hospital, and they were shaking, and they couldn't deal with whatever. But we didn't hear about that.
Well, there's a support system in society for these people.
That's right. That support.
It's accepted, and
that affection, that love, that that welcoming,
and it frames how you individually look at the event differently if you have that support or if you don't have that support. Because really, what is it? Shakespeare, what does he say? There is neither good nor bad, but thinking makes it so. The way that we look at things, or Viktor Frankl, the fellow who was in the concentration camps, lost everyone he loved, and he was a doctor, and he looked at the effects of these Nazi concentration camps on the psyche of people while he's in there, and he used his time as a bit of an experiment mentally to keep himself rolling. And he says, how come some people can laugh and joke and other people are absolutely falling apart? And they're both in the same situation. And he came out with, what was his famous quote? The one thing that you can't take from me is the way that I choose to respond to what you do to me. The last of life's great freedoms is one's ability to choose their own attitude in any given circumstance. And so really being able to choose your own attitude sometimes is predicated on those around you. If everyone looks at you as the bad person, or they look at what you do as a joke and a story that they tell over beers, perhaps you start looking at it in the same way.
But you can't allow that to happen. Let's continue on. So, Second World War, they come back. Everything's, there are people clearly affected, but the majority are welcome back. Vietnam War.
Right.
These guys, these U.S. soldiers, Marines, airmen, sailors coming back, they're called baby killers.
Right.
Huge protests against the war. And without getting into the politics, whether that war was wrong or right, and look at how long it lasted. It lasted from, 1961 or 2 all the way through, 10 years of this going on. And it was always kind of a bit of a shadow war and with the ideals of, suppressing communism, but never really fought in the fashion that a powerful nation like the United States would fight. It was always sort of fringe methods, measures, right? There was no overwhelming defeat of the enemy. There was no real, at the end of it all.
There's no win.
There was no win. There was no completion. There was no satisfaction that we went and did the right thing. And then when we get back, our own people are, baby killers and,
right.
horrible things. And that's when we really saw the preponderance of post-traumatic stress.
Right.
These Vietnam vets that were, starting to act out and do things and go on. And this is the start. And then, as we have evolved in our recognition of how the body can be affected, the mind can be affected by this sort of stuff, we're seeing it better off. We're still seeing it happen, but a lot of people are being prevented from acting out. Now, the thing is, it's like so much. There's so much media attention to anything like this that happens. It looks like there's more.
Right.
There isn't more. In fact, there's probably less of it now because of the treatment. But
just gets more attention.
But there's more attention when it does happen. Mm-hmm. And this, again, is like, to think, oh, my gosh, this is rampant. It's not. Don't think that, it's an absolute that it's going to be the worst situation for me. That guy had it way worse than what you did, and look what happened to him. To do the things you're not going to be that way as long as you get some treatment for it and do what people ask of you to go through.
So one thing that if somebody finds themselves in that situation and they're dealing with the recurring thoughts and they're dealing with the aftermath and they're dealing with possible criminal or civil litigation, little things that they can do. Exercise. Exercise is huge. It releases endorphins. It gives you a feeling of accomplishment. It's your diet. Eating a little bit better food is a big helpful thing. These are just physical things you can do. One thing that is really difficult to do is, not difficult to do, easy to do, but difficult for possible recovery, and that's alcohol. And so often people will look to the alcohol as a possible solution and numb it out, but it does have a compounding effect on the psychological response to these things.
Yeah. You're just, again, do I think in a team environment and when we went through things, did we go for drinks? Like after the riot, did we get together and reminisce? Yeah, sure. After a couple other things that I've been through, did we? Yeah. But is that the answer or the solution? No, it's not. I'll tell you one of the most interesting things that, in a post situation after the riots in '94, we were having big debriefings, and you were, notified that on this date you would report to this location for the purpose of debriefing after the incident. And the individual that was there that was directing the debrief, had everybody sitting in this big circle, and you're vulnerable. Your feet are on the floor, your arms are not crossed. He's looking for all this
Right.
sort of stuff, and we're all looking towards this guy, and he starts saying, you might feel all these things, like feeling complete, and that you let people down, and that this was like you might be having nightmares and all this stuff. And I still remember this one individual. She said, I don't know about the rest of the people here, but I feel great. and you start to see heads start to nod a little bit. And then she says, not only do I feel great, that was like one of the most terrific moments in my life. And she went on to say, now, it wasn't the fact that it was a wholesale, attack on everything that you've ever hated in your life or anything. It was like, what was important was in this group situation that she stood shoulder to shoulder with all these other people that were in equally as bad of a situation as she was. And that those people were there and they got through it together, and everybody, was okay.
Right.
And that was again, suppression in a normal world. And that's where they were fighting towards in the beginning of that debriefing, was to tell you should feel, or they expected you to feel. And the reaction was, and an acceptance by everybody there that, you know what? That was okay.
Mm-hmm. What a healthy way to deal with it, too.
And it was. And it was actually what's the word I want to look for? A turning point, what's the other one?
Pivot?
Yeah, diametrically opposed.
Oh.
No, there's a better one in there. I'll think of it when I haven't been drinking. No, just kidding. But that psychologist said, I got to change the way I'm approaching this, and they did. And it was just interesting, that one incident. This was a huge learning environment for that psychologist, because they were never dealing with couple hundred people or more that went through these sessions afterwards.
And you know what? Maybe a good psychologist shouldn't be telling a person how they should feel. Maybe they should be asking the question. And I think that emphasizes a really good point, which is there's a whole slew of different professionals out there who are psychiatrists or psychologists. If they're not speaking your language, find somebody else.
Yeah. And that's, doctor shopping is not uncommon in this day and age, or second opinion. And like I say, if you are in that, this treatment doesn't seem to be working for me, go somewhere else. Go somewhere else and see what they have to say. I'm always a fan of going to somebody that might have a little bit of experience in the subject matter.
Right.
Okay. I want to have somebody that's got context on what I'm talking about, and that's a help, and there are people like that. There are people that, Randy Makoff, he left the police service. He became a counselor, or a psycho, and that's his thing. But he's got that grounding. So if he's talking to the cops, he was a cop. I mean, there are, women who are psychologists that were rape victims and have that grounding, and they went through all the stages that go on that are a part of such a horrible trauma. What's worse, being murdered or being raped? My God, a rape victim has to live it every day. The murder victim, it's horrible. It's an awful thing, but it's not the same. And if somebody has walked that mile ahead of you, it's a lot easier to take information from them. It's just a thought and just the way I am. Like I don't want to go and train for something with somebody who maybe hasn't even done it themselves. I would rather I would go and listen to somebody who has a bit of experience and feel better about that.
So that covers a fair bit on the after. The after really is check yourself out, check your surroundings, make sure the threat's done.
Well, the after is in the immediate, in the near, and then in the future.
Right.
Okay.
And the near and the future, a lot of that has to do with how you deal with it in the immediate, because that can really shape how the future looks. You ran your mouth right afterwards to the media. You're talking about how great you feel and how fast it was over, when in fact video cameras will show it being a lot longer and contradict you, and now you look like a liar. Maybe just zipper your mouth up, say what's important in the time, and talk to some professionals.
Yep. And you know what? Even if you aren't directly involved and you do witness something horrible like that, but you now have given a statement, you are now in it.
And that's it.
You are let's go back to what kind of started this, Travis. I said, hey, we're watching all this stuff on TV, and one of the reoccurring statements is, I can't believe it.
Right.
I've never seen anything like it. So now those people who were not directly involved, they were in the nearby, are going to be the people who are given statements perhaps later, are going to be witnesses in court. And that all could have an effect or an outcome on you if you were part of the direct, if you were at the epicenter of whatever happened. So we need to understand that. And again, let's talk to those people on the periphery. If you were emotionally affected by what you saw, take advantage of our medical system and get something for it. Get the treatment you need. When you're giving your statement to the cops, tell the cop, is it normal that I'm feeling like this afterwards? The measure of the police officer will, of course, and let's, here's on the back of my business card is victims assistance, and through WorkSafe BC and their agreements and other things that are out there and available to you, you get help, and it's not going to cost you anything.
And I think that's a really good point.
Yeah.
Asking for that help from an officer on the scene is a statement in itself.
Right. And I mean, and I really want to, at this point too, not just because I did it and because my circle of friends extends to law enforcement, but really they're in most cases to help. Although sometimes you got to hurt somebody to help them, and we can't emphasize, that it would be better if that didn't happen, but that's not all cops do. These are highly intelligent, dedicated, and this is for somebody out there, courageous people who are willing to leave their homes every day with the potential of not coming back to it to do things for you. But in the mundane, in the day-to-day, they have the information, the skills, and the ability, to genuinely help you out of these situations.
I always look at police like any other profession, like any other person. There's going to be the preponderance, the gross majority of police officers are people who want to do good and have high ideals, and that's why they get into it. But there are going to be a couple bad apples, and there's going to be a couple that are absolutely exemplary. But after a while of being a police officer and dealing with the same things, human nature, it's normal. People tend to develop patterns and get in ruts, kind of like game animals have game trails for a reason, because that's the easy way. They've learned that's where it goes. And after a certain period of time, it's not that a police officer could be bad, and they aren't, but they're just doing their job. But they're definitely not out there to do bad against you. And there's going to be some that are always just absolutely striving. And I find more and more that they are just out there striving. But the media doesn't really pick up on those ones, do they?
Nope. They're looking for the bad examples, and that goes through. And, you got to remember, absolutely everybody out here that's listening today has a bad day. And so if that's the bad day that you met that cop on, if that was their bad day, you can't condemn everybody that's out there, nor maybe even that person that you dealt with in uniform that day. And a complete condemnation from a one contact thing, not very good.
And after an incident like this, wanting to explain your side, that you're right, and you just want to tell the police officer, and you see them treating you in a fashion that maybe you're a suspect, and that can be difficult to take, or maybe they're having a bad day and they just automatically put that black hat on you right from the beginning. That can all be very difficult for people to understand, because they tend to depersonalize the person in uniform. But
Look
they're
at
going through the same
system.
garbage.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I say, when you're about to give a statement and they stop you, and then they tell you that you're not obliged to say anything. And
Shut your mouth.
Shut your mouth. That's exactly right. And even though that I never did anything wrong, shut your mouth.
That's right.
That's what Now, this is the only costly thing involved in there is getting a lawyer involved, because that is money, but that's money well spent, because shut your mouth. I can't say anything more.
Right.
And that's, that means that you're being looked at for whatever this is.
Right.
And until circumstances clear you, you need to, prepare yourself. I want to cooperate with you, but at this point I need to, have my thoughts sort of examined.
And there's nothing that you can say right now that you can't better articulate
Later on.
tomorrow,
Right.
the next day.
Exactly.
Nothing's changing.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, leaving it at that.
I think so.
Okay.
Okay. Paul, thank you very much. This has been a fantastic series. We've been getting great feedback from all the listeners on it. I really appreciate your unique insight on this.
I don't think it's unique, but it's, one that I'm willing to talk about, and I'm not right.
Well, you've got a unique perspective, and you can speak from your perspective, and I appreciate that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks for the opportunity, Travis.